I do have one apology tonight, and that is Councillor Henderson, and there are no items adjourned and lying on the table. If we move to item 5, it's minutes of the previous meetings, and the recommendation is the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of August be confirmed as true and correct. Do I have? Thank you very much, Councillor Mann. And seconded by, sorry I didn't see your hands go up, Councillor Wales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. Minutes of the special council meeting on the 5th of September. The recommendation is that those minutes are confirmed as true and accurate. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to them? Does anybody want to speak to them? To the floor, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We don't have any deputations. We do have 2 questions from Mr. Charles, who's just come in at the right time.
No, Mayor. We have a deputation, don't we?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you very much. Timing is perfect. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Shall I just carry on?
Yes, please.
Good. Team Victor have been contacted by members of the public for details regarding the type and quantity of contaminate which was discovered after soil testing was undertaken in Ocean Street prior to the commencement of the Stage 4 upgrade. The question is, in the public interest, would you name and describe the contaminant and quality of material removed and taken from the EPA, or taken to the EPA, wherever, Noarlunga or wherever?
I'll try and pronounce it correctly, Mr. Charles. The primary concern related to the contaminant identified as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon benzoaprilene. I can give you that in writing so that you can read it if I've mispronounced it. And a total of 1,600 tonnes of contaminated soil was removed, and it was taken to the EPA licensed landfill site at Lonsdale. Thank
you very much. Thank you for that reply. The other question I had, Team Victor had, of course, was due to the asbestos road-based contamination issue and the $10 million and 15-year cost to ratepayers to pay it off, Team Victor believed that if the position is by Acting Chief Executive Officer Karen Rokaczynski that's available on the board, it will be seen by the public as even more isolation from public scrutiny, as the board is currently fully confidential. There's murmuring going on about that, so why not demonstrate, the question is, openness and promote maximum public confidence in the FROA board by holding the position open for representative of the public, that is the new elected member.
The resignation of Councillor Littley created a vacancy for the position on the FROA board. The term of this board position actually expires at the end of the term of the current council, so that new board position would finish in November. It's possible that there'll be one board meeting, if at all, if there is going to be a board meeting at all in this short period of time before the new council appoints their board representative for the next 4-year period. Should the council not to resolve to appoint somebody at all to this vacant board position, then the effect would be that the City of Victor Harbor would be without a board member representation on that board for this short period of time. It also could potentially impact on the achievement of a quorum should there be other board members that are not able to attend. So as described in the report, item 14.4 in the agenda, the new council will determine their new board member for the 4-year term at the inaugural or the ordinary council meeting in November, in line with the FROA Charter. And council can appoint either a staff member or a council member to that board.
Good. Thank you very much for your reply. That was full and well done.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
There are no petitions, so we
Excuse me,
now...
Mayor Jenkins.
Yes,
I
Councillor
believe
Batesworth.
there is someone here wishing to do a deputation. I think if we could ask leave of the meeting, if that person could speak. There are members of the community here. I think it's rude for us not to accept.
We
their
haven't
deputation.
received any request for a deputation that I am aware of. I'll just double check with Karen Rokoczynski to see whether or not administration received something and didn't put it in the agenda. Katie has done a check and there are no requests for a deputation that we can find. With the leave of the meeting though, I'm more than happy to take a deputation. I'll need 2/3 of the elected members to agree to that. So those people that agree to a deputation tonight, that's all unanimous. Thank you very much. And Steve, I see that you're here and I presume that you're here to do a deputation. Please come forward.
Sorry if I didn't, Andrew mentioned to contact you. I thought I sent an email to you.
No, it hasn't come through. But please, you know, you've done deputations before to us, so you know that you've got 10 minutes, and that includes question time as well. So please take a seat and talk to us.
Andrew, I'd like to thank Andrew. I'd like to thank Andrew for he very quickly popped in a motion that first of all I've only as of yesterday actually read the council on the motion in regards to the signs on Granite Island and the sign as you enter the causeway, and he was keen for me to come in and just say a little bit about the history of the sign, how effective the sign is, because and so I just and I'd like to thank behind me is some of the volunteers and the skip people who are out there, will be out there tonight as well, and I just thought I'd just go through some information about the signs and the sign. Could you grab the big one, please? Historically, obviously the last 10 years, well, thank you, Pip. Historically, the signage, the last 10 years for penguins has been pretty tough. Obviously, we got through to 2020 and the numbers actually picked up. We actually jumped up to 44 with about 20-something chicks, so we had about 70 birds and we were really looking happy. And the birds were behaving like I hadn't seen for about 20 years. And then we had the shame of the fox attacks. I think all the reports, I've got copies of reports at home from the 1980s that say the priority if you have a colony of penguins is keep the feral animals away. Foxes, cats and dogs, basically. And I think Dean Brown in 1994 said he'd promise that we'd have a gate, and that won't happen, but that was back then. We got lots of, it's the one reason why penguins obviously don't live on the mainland, because of that reason. We have lots of reasons for signs. Oceanica, we've been there and they had business, there's business type signs. Flinders Uni, I can pass these around, but Flinders Uni went to a lot of trouble to come up with a signage that would suit children and people who, for instance, don't read English perhaps very well, be inclusive. So Flinders Uni put together these signs with this character, the little penguin, which does appear on the volunteer shirts. So it was all to link up about getting a message, and this is often given out. The dogs have always been a problem. I think it's tricky having a 600-metre causeway because it's always been an issue, because when you spot a dog, the one thing, it is under the guise, it's all under the heading of DEW. It's their responsibility. They're the only ones to give a fine. Really, they're the only ones who officially should really say they're protecting the wildlife. And so that always is a little bit of a difficulty. And I know how busy, I work with DEW a lot. I collect the dead birds. I do all sorts of things with them to try and take the work. But if in the past you ever went up to somebody and mentioned about a dog, you often got, where's the signs? Because the only signs we used to have were the little discs, the little circular signs. It was often, where's the sign? You're often told where to go if you brought up about having a dog on the island. Some were sorry and most ignored. And so dogs were an issue, and it was almost as if once you drifted onto the causeway, you were off and running. And that was just the way it ended up. And I could understand the public from being pulled up on their dog on the island. They've already crossed the causeway. They didn't see the small signs. There were lots of them. I think more and more of those little signs were added, but they just didn't really work very well. We got lots of reports from Horse Tram, as Carol knows, the Big Duck, the Oceanic staff, friends and the public. The new causeway came along and that sort of changed things a bit. Initially, as soon as the piling started, we had the issue of not only a lot of dogs on the old causeway, we also had people taking them out there to watch the piling. And you often got into, the causeway became a grey area. So in other words, you could approach somebody, but they hadn't gone to the island, is the way they'd put it. Or you'd ask them to go back and obviously there might be something. The people who got involved were actually McConnell and Dow. McConnell and Dow had work to do and they had to control the causeway. And they actually got very frustrated with the number of dogs. They sort of got frustrated to the point, Pip, there's some little signs back there as well, that off their own back, I turned up and I reckon at one stage when the fencing was done, they actually put, I think they put 11 of these up and they put another 4 on the other end. And the whole idea was they just got so tired about telling people you shouldn't have dogs. And so it actually was McConnell and Dow, pat on the back, who actually tried to solve the problem before they entered the causeway. So that was a crucial point, okay? So they were brilliant. They've worked, the environment's a huge thing for them. They've actually won awards. You all probably knew that with the causeway on the environmental work they did. They're still putting, right tonight, they're actually putting sound mats over a big chip that's sitting at the other end of the causeway. And we're having piling happening again. So it was nice of them too. They actually invited me to join the panel about signage. And I realised once the signage, and we had about 3 meetings, and it was involved DEW and DEET and everybody involved. It was confidential at the time, so I have checked with them to say, can I talk about it? And they said yes. And the idea was it seemed like most of the signage, which is wonderful, don't get me wrong, I think the signage there is brilliant. I love the stories, I love the whole, even to the point it matches in with the deck and all that. But they still were, they were really frustrated by the dogs. And so we have had sandwich boards for a long time. That's been there for the DW, it's been there for Oceanic, and so we took the same size and we put together, Stephen Adams and I at Links Printing. I have been a design teacher for 40 years, so I've worked a little bit on signage and logos, and we came up with this sign, and this is the sign that's there at the moment. And we thought we'd give that a go and see how it went. And one of the reasons was that DEET had a representative at the meeting who, when he said, well, why do you want to stop the dogs? And I just gave broad reasons. And people were talking about, like, I don't like the negativeness of signs and fines and things like that. And so we kept our penguin on it. The no dogs is pretty obvious. We kept this because it would just tweak again if they saw the DEW signs. That was the whole. But this part here has been worth its weight in gold. That part there, whether it's a chop, yesterday, Mum was talking to the 2 daughters about why it's so important that we don't have dogs go over. It's a conversation piece. This is normally on signage at the bottom, and the thank you from the little penguins is on there. These are the things I think the sign works by connecting the fragility of the whole wildlife of the island. It just starts off this way. It stops the problem before people head across. I've seen many people, I've got photos of people discussing what are we going to do with our dog at the start of the causeway. And someone will say, I'll mind the dogs. and there's no aggression. They've sorted it out. There's no one halfway across having a go or anything like that. There's no one on the island talking about fines. It takes all of the pressure off. I think people think we care from the sign. I get a lot of people who bring up about the wildlife because of the sign. I think it even matches over that people read the sign and come back and they'll even think about things like litter. They seem to start to change their idea. It touches on the fox attacks, and that gives a lot of sympathy. It promotes, one of the things I'd say is that it's less
2 minutes.
Less work for DEW.
Questions.
And the council, I think I'd love it if we could join together with this, because I think it's a way that we could link up with the message that's getting across. I think we can work. The idea is that Andrew's proposing, and we're keen, the group is keen to have the permanent sign that could stay. Now the word permanent, I think is flexible. I think the colony is in a little bit of strife. I think the next 2 years are crucial, especially the next 2 breeding seasons. And I'd love to talk to the council about that at some time, because I do know tomorrow I'll be with some grade 5s at Sturt Street in Adelaide. And at the end of that, we'll talk about KI, we'll talk about all these things about penguins. And they're the sort of things which I'd love to share with you guys, because I've never spoken to the council about our penguins. I've spoken to a couple of individuals, but that would be great. Thanks for listening. I didn't perhaps cover everything, but I think the sign's important, and I hope that came across.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We've probably got time for one question if David Kemp.
Thanks, Steve, for your presentation. Just a question along the point that you spoke about fines. You're not using that, but in your conversations with the Department of Environment and Water and the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, they're the ones who control the causeway and the island. Have you had any conversation about how fines would be implemented by those organisations? Because it's not a council problem.
No.
So have you had any conversations at all?
No, I personally would like to take the whole point about doing it before the causeway means that we've always had the help with the council that's on that territory, which is brilliant. Personally, I'd like to take the fine side part off, because I think the sign works the best because of it tells a story, and the people, the guy yesterday, when I took this photo, and I'd like to point out on this photo, I could pass that around, I know there won't be time.
Thank you, Stephen.
But no, I'd rather have the fines off. I don't think that's part of it myself.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
That's all right. Thanks for letting us jump in.
Excuse me again, Mayor Jenkins. Would we be able to move 19.2 up until now so that we can discuss that while the residents are still here?
We could do that with leave of the meeting. I'm happy to do that. So that's 19.2, which is, you're happy for that? Thank you. So we move to 19.2, which is a motion on notice, prohibition of dogs on Granite Island. And the first recommendation is receiving and noting the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and seconding Councillor Glasbrook. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Can you perhaps encourage them, if we're going straight to this, the members of the gallery who have just left, I think they'd be interested in hearing this, because this is about the penguins. We'll just carry on with receiving and noting the report. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? No. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillor Robertson, would you like to propose your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to change it as well, please. I would like to delete the last 15 odd words from after the bracket where it says sandwich board format. So to delete which was funded by Save the Penguin, Granite Island and Penguin Monitoring Groups.
Okay, thank you. So your recommendation reads that council approve the permanent erection on council land nearest to the causeway entrance of the present sign in sandwich board format. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. Thank you very much. Yep.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I think you've had a very good presentation from about the impact of that sign and how important it is from Mr. Hedges. To me here, this should be a chance for the City of Victor Harbor to really engage with this whole program of trying to save this population of penguins on Granite Island, which has been so important to our economy down here, for tourist economy. And if the penguin numbers can be lifted up again, will be so important once again for the island. I just wanted to acknowledge here that the prevention, I think, is better than cure, and that, as mentioned here in the officer commentary here, that having the signs on council's land, which is before that of Department of Transport's land or infrastructure, that this is the time to educate those people who are largely visitors and tourists, that it's really critical that no dogs are taken across to the island. But also here that I think that all signs have a cost associated with them, but we probably find that wouldn't necessarily have to be borne by the council. So I think could say some other things in relation to this, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Do I have a second of that motion? Councillor Kemp, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I support this because it's about education. It's really educating the community, visitors about the issues of the penguins on the island through signage, also through other means, but that may come later. But I think if you get the right type of sign there, it will send a very strong message. The simpler, the better. And of course, we know that DIT will put their own signs up where they need to on the causeway. And so I believe this is a good initiative to actually get a very simple message out there which works. So I think it may work. I do have a question about the issues around pollution of visual signs. According to the signage guidelines of 2018, speaks of rationalisation of signs wherever possible, noting that too many signs create visual pollution and become ineffective. Just part of the commentary by the administration, do you see that too many signs at the causeway will become a visual pollution? Because I do have an issue around Kent Reserve where there's 14 signs at the boat ramp. So I'm not quite sure what the number is.
Let's just keep it to the causeway, Councillor.
Yeah, but we're talking about signs, pollution. And that's the analogy I'm drawing up. So what is the...
Who is your question to, Councillor Kemp?
The question is, what is the appropriate number of signs according to the policy?
Kathy or Graham?
Through the Mayor, the guidelines, that's not a policy, guidelines don't talk to how many signs it takes, or what's that critical one that pushes it over into signage pollution. It really talks about whether they're necessary or not. And if there's 14 signs and 13 signs are unnecessary, then that might be considered signage pollution. If there's 14 signs and 14 signs are necessary, perhaps it's not, it's just relative to circumstances. And I think the one you're considering tonight is relative to circumstances. It's purely what the policy or the guidelines say.
Thank you for that, Director Padhouse. Again, I think in consultation with the Department of Infrastructure, to work out what type of signs we need there, from what their perspective, and also from the Penguin Group, I think they could get enough signs up to get the message across in a sync way. So I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And I know that the council has got a meeting with the structure in January, and perhaps they might want to put that on the agenda to discuss signs with them, so that those can be rationalised if need be. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, just quickly, I'd like to just agree with Councillor Robertson in relation to the potential for, economic development in relation to penguins. Unfortunately, last week I had to go to Renmark for a funeral, and I spoke to a gentleman who I'd never met before in my life, believe it or not, and the one question that he asked me about Victor Harbour was about the penguins. And I found that incredibly amazing that this was coming up tonight. One person spoke to me about Victor Harbour, and it was about penguins. So I think that's an important point. The other thing I'd like to say, I noticed in the report here, it says that it's not the City of Victor Harbour's responsibility to enforce dogs on the island, but I think we still do have a responsibility to try and protect our wildlife. So I take it very seriously, and I think we should support this.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Robertson, would you like to close the debate?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour and those against? Congratulations, and thank you very much also Steve Hedges and the Granite Island volunteers. I think you do a wonderful job, and I think that if we can do anything to educate people so that we can protect our penguins and protect all the wildlife on Granite Island, we have a responsibility to do that. So well done to everybody. We do now move on to item 9. So we go back and item 9 is the outstanding resolutions report. I'll just wait until the gallery is finished talking. If you want to talk outside, please feel free to. Thank you. The recommendation is that Council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report for September. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And Councillor Robertson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Just a couple of quick questions. Man. If I might, page 16 at the very bottom. Excuse me. What's the status of this request to the Fraua management? This has been on the books since November 21 about the solid waste. It was supposed to be implemented in line with 22-23. Well, we're in 22-23. What's the status of this?
Director Hayden, can you answer that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. I'll get an up-to-date response from Fraua, but the implementation is just about the modelling. It's not about implementing the service itself. You might recall that Simon, when he was here, was talking about as part of their adopted plan, they already had it in there to develop modelling for the service, which they would then share with us, and they would be developing those models in 22-23. So we can go back and ask for their timeline, but essentially it's not actually implementing the service. It's coming back to us with what that modelling looks like and telling us how much it would cost in time for our next budget process.
Sorry if I might ask a supplementary question. So that means that for this year, there's going to be no change to the offering of any costs for the setting up that system. Do you know if Fraua has actually talked to any of the service clubs about this so far?
Through the Mayor, I'm not sure if they've talked with any of the service clubs, but that's correct. There's no, and that wasn't the resolution. The resolution was actually to come up with the modelling for the service and then come back to us. So no, there'll be no change to the actual service provided this year.
I might move to page 19. If I might move to page 19, the item on the Bluff Master Plan there, the stakeholder consultation is continuing through the caretaker period. Is it during this consultation, which I guess that's continuing one is with the staff?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. It could be with the staff, but it could also be some of the key stakeholders like our First Nations representatives. Essentially, we're not going out to broad community consultation, but key stakeholders that we engaged with previously, like First Nations groups, we intend to continue during caretaker. Okay,
but yeah, I thought the First Nations would be one because that process takes a bit longer. But the is it possible, is there any other stakeholders apart from the First Nations that will be getting consultation from the consultants?
Through the Chair, not specifically that I'm aware of. It mostly is during caretaker. We're being very careful about who we're consulting with, and there'll be broad community consultation once we've briefed the News Council. So I think the broad community consultation is across January, February, and obviously there'll be a lot broader consultation then.
And in general, that with the stakeholder consultation meetings, can the public attend those as observers, not participants?
Through the Chair, no, I wouldn't say that it would be appropriate for public to attend a meeting with, for example, our First Nations representatives. And I'm not sure why they would come along. Those things are really just discussing what, from First Nations perspective, what areas are sensitive, what they would like to see there, what the sort of, from a First Nations perspective, what is important to be reflected in the plan and for us to consider in the broader master plan and concept planning.
A supplementary question, if I might, is that education process one that staff will be going through with First Nations people? Isn't it important for the public to have the same chance to understand what the processes are and engage in that?
Through the Mayor, I agree with you. Education is extremely important, but I don't think a meeting where the First Nations people are sharing their perspectives with us is the appropriate place. Certainly, whatever the First Nations representatives share with us that is appropriate will be reflected in the master planning document, and that's the whole purpose of us meeting and engaging with them.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to speak to the motion or have any questions? Councillor Kemp, you didn't want to speak to start off with.
I've got a couple of questions.
You've got a couple of questions, all right.
Thank you. Page 17, the time limit, street parking, Whalers Restaurant, public consultation passed in April this year. What's the status at the moment of the public consultation? Because we're moving into spring and summer seasons are going to be their peak period, especially when now the boating group will be down and they're wanting their car park. So where are we at with the public consultation and the trying to fix this time limit?
Director Pathouse.
Through the Mayor, the public consultation was completed some time ago already, and Council deferred the matter on the basis of a deputation that was put forward in relation to development interests or developer interests associated with the Bluff Apartments. So a level of research and investigation has been done in relation to that in preparation for bringing that back to Council to consider it further. They've requested an FOI, or they've put in an FOI, they being the developer's representative or the Bluff Apartments representative have put in an FOI so they can understand their position a little bit better first. So they've actually requested that we delay or Council delay considering that further. So that's where it's up to at the moment. The car park is still open to the public for parking, but it's just not time limited at this stage.
Thank you. So from that point of view, then maybe the new council will be dealing with this more than likely. Yep, thank you. And my last second question, on page 18, the Happy FM sponsorship proposal. My understanding that we were going to include 2 community radio stations in that proposal from our resolution. So I'm just wondering whether that needs to be changed for the 2 community radio stations receive some type of support on council matters, not just the Happy FM.
It's the first.
Does anyone?
Which is the item you're referring to?
It's on page 18, the second last line, Happy FM sponsorship proposal.
Yeah, Happy FM sponsorship project.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Through the chair, I can answer that question. So that's ultimately, council only resolved at the last council meeting that we would, rather than apply sponsorship, that if we did do public consultation, that we would just simply look at radio stations and other media outlets and pay on a fee-for-service basis rather than applying sponsorship. So if we indeed do put together a consultation plan like we would for Bluff Master Plan and all these large projects, it would come to council as it normally does with an engagement plan, and that would include those media outlets. So those haven't necessarily progressed in that time between the August council meeting and now. We've advised Happy FM, but it wasn't explicit to any particular stations, but it did sort of broaden it out beyond just Happy FM, to clarify.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Just a clarification for simplicity, should we not change that from Happy FM to community radio stations or out immediate, just so it doesn't confuse people?
Through the Mayor, that's actually the title of the agenda report that came to council. So that's how our governance process works there. And then obviously council made a resolution that differed slightly from the recommendations in there. And so it did broaden it to extend beyond Happy FM for that particular item.
Following on from that question, Acting CEO, I wonder whether or not you could put in brackets underneath where it says Happy FM sponsorship proposal to incorporate what Councillor Kemp said, because if you're looking at this, if a new council is looking at this, they may think it just relates to Happy FM. Something in there that clarifies that it's both, even if it's in brackets. You've got the agenda and some clarification for it.
We can look at how we'll, we'll add it as a follow-up action. I understand what you're saying. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you very much. That closes the debate with Councillor Kemp, who was the mover, asking questions. I don't think that you could say that that was a rebuttal of the, or a closing argument. But I'll put that recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? We now move to 9.2, which is election for Local Government Association President. I'll do the first 2 recommendations en bloc. Then the third recommendation, I'll ask for a nomination. If that nomination is lost, then we'll go to another nomination. You can see on page 21 the different mayors that have put their name down to be president. Because it is not related to anybody in the chamber, it's not a ballot, a secret ballot that we would have normally. So I'd be looking for a nomination from the floor. If that nomination is lost, we'll go to another nomination until that nomination has been carried by the floor. But I'll do the first 2 recommendations en bloc. Councillor Little, are you moving that way? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to the first 2 recommendations? Does anybody want to speak to the first 2 recommendations? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Would somebody like to move the 3rd recommendation, with a particular person to vote for. Councillor Littley?
Yeah, I'd like to move that with the recommendation of Mayor Erica Vickery of Naracoorte Lucindale Council as the nomination for the LGA President.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that?
Only to say that I've looked through the nominations and I feel that Mayor Erica Vickery, in my mind, is the person that I'd like to most see in that position, and I think would be very representative of the broader local government association and interests. It has some real synergies with our own council. That's another with the particularly with the primary industries type sector and that around across the Fleurieu. So that's why I'm putting Mayor Erica Vickery forward.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Schofield?
Thank you, and that is likewise reading through the small CVs that we have in front of us. I believe that she would be the most appropriate to carry out that position.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to speak to that recommendation? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? That's lost. Would somebody like... Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that we propose Mayor Parkes from Alexandrine.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would you like to speak, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, I would, Mayor. I read through all of these, the CVs that were there, their proposals for what they were going to do, and I was pretty disappointed that none of them talked about the need for the local government association to form closer relationships with the chambers of commerce. They're all focusing on government and grants, I suspect. But the only one that mentioned innovation, which is what we're in the middle of with our, all the councils are in the middle of in terms of the implementing the corporate software, was Mayor Parkes. So that's why I was going to vote for him.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a personal nature that, you know people, you know how they perform and how they act. And Mayor Parkes has done a reasonable job over the last quite a few years, and you get to know a person. Unfortunately, you don't get to meet all the other candidates who are putting their names up to understand them, and you only can go from what they've stated in their CV here. But I just feel that Mayor Parkes, who's been in this area for a long time, would have a better understanding of the holistic view of what the local LGA will be doing for all the communities, especially on the southern Fleurieu, for sure. That's why I'll support him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does anybody else want to speak to this resolution? Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Similarly to Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp, I think it's important that we support Mayor Parkes in this. I think he would have better understanding of local government from a Victor Harbour point of view and better able to represent our region, but also similar to what Councillor Robertson said, from the information we were given and presented by the candidates, he was the one who put forward the closest thing to a plan, a vision, something out of the ordinary for the local government association. It wasn't just, I'm really good at managing things, please give me the job. It was something more than that, I believe. And I think having observed how he's performed his role over at Alexandrina over the last couple of terms, he's very adept at dealing with some very complicated personalities, and that's something you absolutely need for this position. So happy to endorse Mayor Parkes for this.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Does anybody else want to speak to this? No. Councillor Robertson, did you want to close the debate? I'll put recommendation 3, that council resolve to vote for Mayor Parkes to be the Local Government Association President. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. So I'd like to give my congratulations to Mayor Parkes and wish him all the best if he gets in. I think that he will speak on our behalf and on behalf of the Local Government Association very well, and he is very much known as a diplomat in this area, and I think will serve us well. We now move to 9.3. And 9.3 we've had is the Local Government Finance Authority election of representative members for the Board of Trustees, and here we're looking for two members. The first recommendation, however, is receiving and noting the report. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? In that case, does anybody want to speak to that? Receiving and noting the report. I'll put it to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that council resolve to vote for 2 persons who are on that list of candidates to be representative board members for the Local Government Finance Authority. Councillor Kemp.
I'll move to nominate Nigel Graves of Light Regional Council, Manager of Finance, and Mark Gray, Manager of Finance of the City of Port Adelaide Infield.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. The reason why I've chosen those 2 gentlemen, because you read their CVs again, but I guess my perspective is that we've got a regional representation and we've got a metropolitan representation to sit on that board, so I think that will give a good cross-reference to the community as a whole, so that's why I thought I chose those 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had Nigel Graves down as my #1 pick. He's fully qualified accountant. But I liked his. I don't know. I'd like to contact him at some stage to find out. He's done a PhD on local government, financial performance, and I think that type of thinking and stuff is there's plenty of room for reform of what goes on in the authority, and I think that it would be interesting to have someone who's actually given some serious thought to that. Of course, as Councillor Kent mentioned, from the Light Council, and and good commercial experience from Mr. Mark Gray. I think with some of the others that there were some experienced people there, but I think it's also good to have turnover in some of these boards. Being there for 10 years on being a board member of that for multiple terms, to me is time to move people on.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to speak to that recommendation? In that case, I'll put it to the floor, and the recommendation is that council resolve to vote for Nigel Graves and Mark Gray. All those in favour? And those against? And congratulations to both of those gentlemen. We now come to item 9.4, and it is sad to recommend that council receive and note Councillor Brian Littley's resignation report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Little, do you want to move that?
Yep.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Little, would you like to speak to your report?
Yeah, I will speak to it. Thank you very much. I'm going to flag that I might push the 5-minute limit, so just give me a heads up and see where we go from there. While you're all aware of my decision to resign from my role as an elected member effective tonight, I believe it is essential that I advise you and the community of my reasons for this decision at this point in time. There's a number of reasons why I see a need to resign from the role. There's a couple of reasons why I'm doing so at this particular time. I'll deal with the why I'm standing down first. It is the case, and I've been quite open about this with my councillor colleagues and publicly, that I live with and manage PTSD, mostly quite effectively, although there are times it can be quite debilitating. I don't have the luxury of knowing when I'm going to need to dedicate more of myself to managing the impact of this serious health issue. Unfortunately, it's also been the case that some people, including some who have been quite active in this chamber, feel it is appropriate to make light of the challenge of dealing with PTSD, even to use my actions in dealing with my PTSD in an attempt to ridicule or undermine my position as a councillor. In addition to this, my profession is as a journalist, something I quite clearly stated when I first nominated for council, a profession I was working when this community elected me as the third candidate across the line, and a profession I strive to excel in. For the overwhelming majority of my term as an elected member, I have been a journalist working in my local community, producing local content on local issues for local media outlets. It is the case that I've not reported on the City of Victor Harbor matters in that time. I have, however, been denied opportunities to work in media organisations because of my elected member status, effectively costing me substantial financial benefit. More recently, I've been made aware of a desire, influenced in part by some elected member colleagues and some hopefuls, for me to be denied the opportunity of working for my local media organisation, or to have my capacity to perform my role as a journalist to the very high standard I'm known for dramatically reduced. One of a number of examples of this is evidenced by a recent unsuccessful code of conduct bid by David Kemp, where his complaint was that I'd written an article for my publication which briefly touched on a public council decision previously reported on my ad and not included in the article by myself but by a sub-editor. The code of conduct complaint, which cost myself, council staff and others significant time and resources to respond to, was that I had not stated that it was my personal opinion and not that of council in an article I'd written. My profession as a journalist has, I consider, been scrutinised more than the professions of any other elected member throughout this time on council, and I'm happy to provide anyone who cares to know some of the examples of this. As a result of this scrutiny, my ability to work in my profession to the high standard I set for myself and to earn an income my 30 years of experience in that profession can demand has clearly been impacted by forces outside of my control. I'm doing a disservice to myself, my profession, and I'll add to the public, the community of media consumers I serve, by continuing in the role of councillor at a time when that readership is hungry for the high-level news and content I'm capable of producing for the local leading newspaper and broadcasters I'm employed by. Why now? Well, I would have liked to have had the option to step down around 12 months ago, when very much struggling with my PTSD, transitioning in jobs and needing to regularly travel interstate, which added significantly more pressure on my time, and when also grieving the loss of my treasured grandmother. That option to step down, though, was not available to me at that time, at least not without considerable cost to our ratepayers for a by-election, given Peter Charles had quit as an elected member around a month earlier, not more than a post-it note of explanation to ratepayers. I put my community and ratepayers before myself and my family at that time. I'm not prepared to do that again, as it is an expense to my health and my profession that I cannot afford. I also have significant media work to undertake for the remainder of this year and a busy time upon us right now with farming work. I'm addressing some health issues which I am pleasingly getting on top of, and I want to continue on that right path. I've taken up the directorship of the National Leave the Light On Foundation while my co-founder is indisposed due to ill health. My family unit has grown with a return to hosting exchange students, and I would like to gain the most from that experience. I'm not able to attend the next and final meeting of the council due to other commitments, and therefore I would not have had the opportunity to address you to give reason for my resignation. As an individual with a great sense of responsibility and affection for my community, and as a journalist with a thirst for providing outstanding journalism, I don't wish to be denied the opportunity to report on the hottest issue in town, and that is the local government elections. Finally, in response to my resignation as an elected member, I have, among other requirements, been requested to reimburse council for the portion of my allowance paid in advance through to the end of the council term. This totals $2,808 at the rate of $52 a day. I hope for the support of my elected member colleagues to have this requirement waived and offer the following advice to support my request. I'm of the opinion that I've consistently...
1 minute, Councillor Littley.
Yep. I am of the opinion that I've consistently performed well and over and above my duties and commitment to the role of elected member by way of hours committed, tasks undertaken and reinvestment in my community to justify receiving the full entitlement of the allowance at this point in time. Not only have I missed just one ordinary council meeting, been a representative on a number of committees and working groups without financial compensation, I also personally have dedicated significant time not just supporting council events, but leading community events to raise significant funds for worthy recipients. And finally, we are in caretaker mode where very little council business can be executed. All of you except for Councillor Glasbrook are in campaign mode, going about your individual business of trying for re-election. Given you all surely consider that you've earned your elected member allowance with your work prior to caretaker mode kicking in, and the majority of your remaining time on this council is arguably to be. I have 2 seconds, 10 seconds.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
Your remaining time on this council is arguably to be invested in your own interests and not council business. I ask that you give consideration to the fairness of the requirement of me to reimburse that allowance. Thank you. I have enjoyed being a part of this council and I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Do I have a second? Oh, I've got a seconder. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to Councillor Littley's resignation report?
Thank you. I can't really speak on behalf of the rest of the elected members, but I thank you very much, Brian, for the work that you've done for the City of Victor Harbor. I've enjoyed working with you. It has been very interesting at times, and I'd like to wish you all the very, very best in your future endeavours. And thank you again for your service.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to speak to Councillor Littley's resignation report? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question, thank Mayor Jenkins. In receiving the report and supporting the report, does that mean that we are signing off on a waiver on his allowance?
No, the recommendation is that Council receive and note the resignation report. There's been no motion put in relation to the allowance, and I'm not sure that we're able to do that. That would have to be something I'd need to ask the staff about, but this just relates to the resignation report.
Thank you.
If there's, Councillor Littley, there's going to be no rebuttal you've put in your report. I would ask, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? Thank you. Once again, Councillor Littley, thank you very much for what you've done.
Can I call a division there? Please?
You can. All those in favour? Councillor Mann, Councillor Littley, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Hales and Councillor Schofield. And those against, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. They may not want you to go, but thank you very much. And I do know that it has been quite difficult for you over the last little while with your mental health problems. And I just would like to commend you for your bravery, I think it is, in sticking with us and showing what you are able to do and working for the community. We now move on to item 10.1, Regional Development Australia, the draft Regional Strategic Plan feedback. The first recommendation is receiving and noting the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to congratulate the staff here in relation to what they've put down here, you know, on page 76 and 77. And I'll be bringing this up again in the next item, which is about the public health plan. And that is that really this feedback report, which is a strategic plan feedback report, is one that is wildly ambitious, and you know, it's not achievable. And this sort of stuff is gets us nowhere, even though we don't pay much. I think I stand to be corrected. I think we tip in 40,000 or something like that a year for this. We probably should be tipping in, you know, 2 or 3 times that amount if we were to really get value out of some of this. But when you get these organisations that go on about, you know, these vast terms of reference and stuff like that, it's good that we're coming to item 3 in here. But I just note there that I really have a lot of difficulty accepting that and a message I think will be sent back to the CEO, Chief Executive Damien Cook, and the other person, Mr. James Sexton, when they come here, which I'm sure they will. That it's good to fashion, you know, what they're doing. That's really going to have some local impact and not just be more reports.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to speak to recommendation 1? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour and those against? That's carried. And Councillor Robertson, I certainly agree with you in relation to the strategic plan and the feedback from the staff. There are some concerns that I also share that have been raised by staff that I think need further discussion with the RDA about. The second recommendation, that Council endorse the feedback provided within the report. Would someone like to move the second recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded by Councillor Robertson. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Schofield? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I just have a question in relation to that. As I said before, the feedback provided I think is spot on. But now, my question is, what actually happens to the feedback provided by this council, at least to the RDA? Is it?
My understanding is that this feedback, as written today on this, will go back to the RDA, and that if the third recommendation is carried, that the council ask Regional Development Australia to speak to the new council about that, taking that feedback into account. They will need to address some of those issues that have been raised.
But would we expect to get feedback from the RDA, or would they compile what we've got to say with feedback they may or may not get from the other 5, I think it is, councils that are involved? And then they send it back then, or?
Director Patterhouse, can you respond to that one?
Sure. Through the Mayor, we would expect that along with our feedback and any other feedback that RDA receives from any of the other councils, that they'll consider that feedback in the context of the plan, and preferably from our perspective make some amendments to the plan that reflect the feedback. But ultimately that'll be a decision that they'll need to make, and then they'll no doubt present it to their board and move on with adopting it as amended or as is.
Are there any further comments or questions in relation to recommendation 2? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I'd just like to iterate Mr. Mark Grisabella, the manager who put his name to this report. I think it's quite an astounding report he put up to identify it. I did read the plan, and I concur with him on a lot of those issues he's raised. Give an example, the vision they have for their plan is actually written in the current tense, you know, not in the future. So that's just an example that they can't get the vision right. So I do support what Mr. Brisabella has put up.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Are there any further discussions? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour, recommendation? Against? That's carried. Thank you. The third recommendation is that Council extend the invitation to RDA to Mr Sexton and Mr Cook to present to Council. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconded by Councillor Robertson.
Sorry, Mayor, I was going to ask if I could have one amendment to this motion.
The third motion you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah, and that is, I think it's just a typo, but the second bottom line, it says, and how it intends to report to the council on its plan. I think that report to should be replaced with work with, which is in various other parts of the report.
If Councillor Schofield's happy for that, we can do that as a variation. Happy with that, Councillor Schofield? So that last sentence will be, as it relates to Victor Harbour, comma, and how it intends to work with the council on its plan going forward. Are you both happy with the wording?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Schofield? Yep. All right. Have you got that, Katie? Yep. All right. Do either of you want to speak to that recommendation?
No.
Yes, look, I'm very disappointed and I'm quite pleased with Mr Brisabella's comments here. I have had some concern for a while with how the regional development is going and just what we do as a councillor receive in support and our community receives in support from them. So I think it would be excellent if we could have the chair and the CEO here to explain just what they are going to do moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to talk to recommendation 3? No, if not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. And yes, I'm particularly interested to hear what their communication plan is moving forward and actually look at the KPIs and how they're going to communicate. One, how they're going to get those fulfilled, and secondly, when they have been delivered. We now move on to 10.2 Southern Hills LGA Regional Public Health Wellbeing Plan. And I'll do the first 2 recommendations on block, if you're happy with that. Receiving and noting the report and receiving and noting the community engagement outcomes report. Happy to move on block, Councillor Littley. Thank you. And seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Littley? Councillor Robertson? Does anybody want to speak to that? In that case, all those in favour? Those against? Third recommendation is that Council endorse the Regional Public Health and Wellbeing Plan. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson. And seconding that, Councillor Littley. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Definitely, we have given a huge free pass to the Health Department on this Regional Public Health Plan and Regional Public Health and Wellbeing Plan. To me, it's a document that's everything to everyone and nothing to anyone. In fact, I think here that really the meat in this particular plan is goal 4. That's something where, you know, it's really that's where the action should be. And because the whole report that's provided says nothing about how much funding is going to be provided and where the key performance indicators are, and the local indicators in particular, that some of these other things that are just going to roll on, like we do our disaster management, the regional bushfire management plan, climate change has its own momentum and actions here, but it's not possible to be lumping all of these ongoing major programs and activities into what should be something that you could pass it on to someone in the street and say, can you see yourself here? Can you see yourself getting any benefits out of this? As I said, you know, to me, the parts that were really important in the whole of this document, which has come down from Adelaide and been driven from the top up there with hardly any engagement outcomes, and the few people, I think there was 2 people from Victor Harbor who contributed to it. It wasn't very complimentary. That what are we doing here? So to me, the ones that were really well developed were the ones in the bottom of page 81, which was 422, 23, 24, 25, and of course the whole of goal 5, councils working together. Well, yeah, sure, but I mean that should be what we do all the time, rather than being, you know, a goal. So to me, I don't think that this plan, public health and wellbeing plan is pretty lame stuff. It's this again, like we were talking about with the RDA stuff, you know, massive objectives, falling in all sorts of peripheral activities, and not focusing on what really matters. And what really matters is goal 4. So to me, it's 20% of the plan is worth endorsing, and 80% is just padding.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Little, do you want to speak to this? Does anybody else want to speak to this? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. This public health plan, I'll just say, is a very high level plan. I know that as Vice President of the Southern and Hills Local Government Association, we actually had somebody that had been working on it for quite some time. A number of the actions are things that the council are doing and are part of our own business plans and our own plans that we're undertaking, such as the disability inclusion plan, which we're doing in collaboration with Business Victor Harbor. We're undertaking the economic development strategy. We're also pursuing the establishment of the regional study hub in conjunction with the Regional Development Australia. All of the other goals, when I look at those, are things that we are actually carrying out. And so while it's very high level, they are things that we're undertaking, and I'd like to commend the Fleurieu and Hills LGA for the amount of work that was undertaken to get there, and also Director Pat House's team, which undertook a lot of work as well. We now move to sorry, where are we? A temporary community sign request, the Middleton Jazz in the Park. One more recommendation, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, number 4. That council adopt the City of Victor Harbour's top actions and focus areas for collaboration between the 6 constituent councils. Would someone like to move that way, Councillor Schofield? And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that? Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and then Councillor Kemp.
Yes, Mayor. On this one here, on Victor Harbour Zone top actions and so forth, it's true, the gentleman from, is it Hills Council that put together this thing basically?
Yep, Southern and Hills Local Government Association Board.
No, there was a driver, the guy that did the community feedback one. There was some, I would just like to highlight that amongst which isn't reflected in this final document because we got so carried away with these big cloud issues. But there were some terrific recommendations in the that came from, you know, even though the public consultation was extremely limited, the other work done by the other help done here, the advisory, that other recommendations that were coming out of the consultation process were really good stuff, and but they're not appearing in like, I think that Victor Harbour had some feedback for their goals because everyone's got slightly different ones, but we could have done with having a good look at all of the others because I thought there was some really sensible, doable, practical stuff that that we could have included in our top actions and focus areas. But you know, it's the way these things are put together.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp, you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a clarification question on the 5 goals. We've only got 4 goals listed with actions. Is the 5th one we don't require to put any actions to, or we're happy with it?
Through the Mayor, the 5th goal was that collaboration between the councils, and that's purely what that was about. So there wasn't anything specifically other than the collaboration. Yeah.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Councillor Schofield, did you want to close the debate? I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Corporate and Customer Service. This is the temporary community event sign request by the Middleton Jazz in the Park. And I will do both of those on block unless anybody would like them done separately. Happy on block, Councillor Littley? Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Littley?
Only to say that I think it's a fair thing to do to award one of our neighbouring operations from neighbouring council the opportunity to advertise their event. It's what I think they'd do for us.
Thank you. Councillor Glasbrook? Nothing to say. Does anybody want to speak to this? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 13 minutes of council committee meetings. And the first recommendation is receiving and noting the Minister for Southern Communities Transport Scheme. Someone like to move? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to it? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's Councillor Glasbrook. You're in favour, thank you. And those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that Council endorse a letter from the Mayor to the Minister of Transport requesting consideration of a free transport for pensioners being expanded to include regional areas. And I think this relates to the new government's policy for having free transport for pensioners in the metropolitan areas. This is wanting it included to the regional areas. You're moving that way, Councillor Kemp. Thank you. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Littley. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I know this has been a hot topic for a long time, and lot of letters and correspondence gone back and forwards, you know, to trying to get some action down in the regional areas for our communities. So I think, you know, while there's a new government in place now, there's another opportunity to see what they can do for our communities. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that?
I'll just reiterate that. It's a good opportunity to press the button.
Thank you. And does anybody else want to speak to it? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I think transport, as you said, Councillor Kemp, has been a hot topic and is one of the major issues down here in terms of lack of public transport. And so anything that we can do to help move that along and advocate for people of Victor Harbour and the surrounding areas, I think that's really important. And I think this council does that really well. We now move to the representative reports, and that council receive and note the representative reports for September. Mr. Schofield, and seconding that, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to the representative reports? Does anybody want to speak to any of them? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 14.3. No, sorry, 14.2 of this one. Item 14.2. The Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority 3-year business plan, and the recommendation is to receive and note the business plan as provided at attachment B. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconded by Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting that?
I'll just say from a representative on the board, from the council member, that this 3-year business plan is all about wellbeing of the community, and that's what we're trying to change into the aquatic centre, is more about wellbeing for the community of all ages.
Fantastic, thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a couple of questions, really, and a bit of a comment. Firstly, on page 135 on the computer, so 134 probably, there's a financial indicators, a little square box there. I think the years are wrong, I would imagine, on that. It's got 22, 23, then 19, 20, and then 2021. I'm presuming that we're talking about, well, the line above it says that 22 to 25, so it's just something to note. I've obviously missed that. If you could get someone to sort that out, thank you.
We'll get them to check it.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about those financial indicators. Personally, I'm disappointed that there's not at least an attempt there to have those improve. Like your operating surplus is minus 25% for, I'm presuming, the next 3 years. And your own source revenue ratio is 58% for the next 3 years. You know, I'd certainly like to see both of those numbers improve. You know, I'd like the operating surplus to be, you know, maybe it might be an attempt to achieve 20%. For example, and the same with your own source revenue. The other thing I would like to know is why they don't have a net financial liabilities ratio. I'm assuming that later in the document there's borrowings. I'll just try and find it. Page 142 or 140 probably, 141. There's net lending or borrowings for the financial year. So there's borrowings for all of the forecast years. So I was just wondering why they don't have a net financial liabilities ratio, because obviously or do those borrowings don't carry over. Do you have an answer to that question?
Perhaps Councillor Kemp, you're on the board. Do you know the answer to that one?
I can't sort of answer them totally. I think some of this, what we're calling it borrowing, is my understanding is that we draw back off our capital debt. Sorry, the capital. Sorry, we have a fund there which is like capital. You know, we draw back off that to replace things within the infrastructure. So whether that's the same, we're using that as a process there. We haven't really come to a decision to go out and borrow any monies, because that would have come to the councils if we were going to borrow money, to notify the councils. I'm assuming that is along the lines that this is expenditure we've looked at that we use to draw back off our capital value depreciation level. That's the only my understanding at this stage, because as I said, if we were going to do any borrowings, this council would know about it.
Not on the board. No, we'll find that out for you, Councillor Glassbrook. And
no, thank you. Yeah, I can understand if that is the case, but if that isn't the case, I think it should be included, because it's an important. It's actually part of the legislation to have those three, I thought, but I know that they haven't had any borrowings in the past. It hasn't had to have been the case. So that's what I wanted to say, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to contribute to the debate? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Now go to 14.3, which is the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority Annual Report. And the recommendation is that Council receive and note the annual report for 21-22. Moving that way, Councillor Schofield. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I will. I think it's a very good report. I think financially, when we have a look at, they've come $16,000 under their budget, with trading only for 4.5 months of the year, it is quite an achievement for them. So things are going pretty good for them at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to say anything about receiving and noting that report? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 14.4, Regional Waste Authority, appointment of a board member. We have had some discussion about this previously, and so I might do those recommendations en bloc unless somebody would prefer it done separately. You like it done separately, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, only because I think that I believe we should call for nominations amongst the elected members group to see if any elected member would like to nominate.
Sure, we'll do that separately then. The first recommendation is the council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Litterly. And seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to that? In that case, I'm sorry, Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. My question is in relation to the report and the process that has gone into, I guess, providing information within it. Noting that the second recommendation that is coming is that we endorse the acting CEO as our representative for the remainder of this term of council. Acknowledging that it's not a long period of time, I would still, my question, I guess, is that was the opportunity provided to elected members to also have, in time for this agenda, have their desire to be that representative given to them?
What I can do, if you'd like to do, is call for a suspension of meeting procedures, and if you would like to have a discussion and if any elected member would like to put their name up, we can make another
So
recommendation.
this is just on receiving the report. It's a simple question of, was the opportunity provided to elected members the same as was provided to the acting CEO?
Thank you for your question, and through the Mayor, no, given that there's approximately 1 month left of the council term, it was thought that the most sensible option, without needing to induct a new elected member who's unfamiliar with the Frawa business, that it would be an appropriate decision or recommendation, should I say, not decision. And then, of course, the new council can determine, well, this current council can actually determine it too. But no. So my recommendation for simplicity was indeed that I take on those duties, should there even be a meeting, which there might not, between now and the end of the council term.
Are there any further questions, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, there are. I mean, at a time when we've got staff overloaded with work, particularly those in the senior positions at the front of the chamber here this evening, you know, I was amazed that that even though there might not be any meetings to go to, that the acting CEO would. I mean, there's a lot of preparatory work going on here in page 158 as to why the acting CEO should be the board member. But given that we have this critical problem with staff availability, particularly at management level, why this would have been considered in line with what Councillor Hales has been saying, if indeed the board can survive without having a Victor Harbor elected member representative, then I'm sure it could. Notwithstanding that they may not be able to get a quota, but I doubt that'll be the case. That and then I also have you know, an issue here with this continual erosion of the process of having elected members, you know, on these board positions. We already see that this is the dilution of the you know, we're only here because we're elected by the community. That means that community participation is watered down continuously, and I object to it a lot. And so, yeah, I find it both strange that this should be put forward like this, and also I find it objectionable that that we would be proposing that at a time when we're overloaded with work, that we would propose that the acting CEO step into this role, which is at present it can be either staff or elected member position, but at present it's held by elected members, and I think it should continue that way.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does any Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I appreciate the concerns expressed around the table. I think, from my perspective, I think it's jumping at shadows a little bit. As the proxy for most of the term for Frawa, I came into the role when Councillor Glasbrook had stopped his term on the board. At that point, then I had to have an induction meeting with Simon Grenfell. Was handed a significantly large binder around the full workings of the board and the explanation of Frawa, considerable amount of information that we had to go through, and to be on that board appointment. So what I see this is, as it's been said, a simple, easy and effective solution for this short-term period of not having to impose the requirements on Frawa to induct an elected member for 1 month, and it's likely to not require much work either. So I just think, in the context of the reality I think this is fine, and I'm very supportive of this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does anybody else want to speak to the first recommendation? Councillor Kemp, you spoke in seconding the motion.
That's right.
Does anybody else want to speak to this recommendation? Hasn't spoken. Councillor Litterly, do you want to close the debate? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. The second recommendation, that council appoint Karen Rokoczynski as the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority's board, commencing Tuesday the 27th of September and concluding in November. Would someone like to move that way? And Councillor Schofield? Speak to that, Councillor Litterly.
Yeah, I'm supporting this because, as Councillor Mann pointed out, the actual process of induction would take all of that month by the time you line things up. So it certainly would take, because there's on-site inductions and a whole heap of things. I just think it's a more streamlined way, and I don't think it undermines the participation of elected members on that board. I don't think that's at all the thought behind this. It's about a streamlined approach. So I'm moving this way.
Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to that seconder? No. Councillor Kemp?
I just have a question. If Councillor Mann has already done the induction process and it was a proxy for Councillor Glasbrook, would he not carry on for 1 month?
Do you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, through the mayor. So when Brian then put up his hand, I think month after, then Brian was inducted. So I probably would have to re-go through the induction and check it all too, as I think I was only in the position for about a month. But I appreciate the offer, David, but I'm more than happy to leave it in the very capable hands of our acting CEO.
Thank you. Is there any for Councillor Glasbrook?
Look, I'm going to support the recommendation. I have to admit, when I first read it, I did get my neck in a little bit of a twist for a minute or two, but I managed to sort myself out. And I do believe that Karen Rokoczynski has been on the board, was on the board when I was there, when there was a member and a staff member. She has got past history. It is for a very short period of time. So I do support this recommendation. I will say, though, that when this comes back to council, because I won't be here, that I strongly support an elected member taking this position. So for those of you who are still here, if you want to hear me ringing in your ears when this comes back to council, I strongly support this position being held by a elected member. I was strongly against the way that the charter was changed, and one of the things that changed was that it could be either an elected member or a staff member, which I strongly disagreed with at the time, because this is local government, and local government, they have community representatives representing them, and that was taken away when we made that decision, which was a terrible decision. So I will support this, but I do agree it needs to be an elected member, in my opinion, in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Does anybody else want to? Councillor Robertson, you haven't spoken to this? No?
I have a question, Mayor, a couple of questions. One is, are there any board meetings proposed to be held for Frower in the next?
I understand that there is one. Karen?
Through the chair, there's one scheduled, although Simon's looking to potentially change the date due to other council election matters. So there may or may not be a board meeting during that time.
And the second question is, so it's probably more likely than not that it won't have another, there won't be another.
I can't give you the percentage, but maybe yes, maybe no, no more than one.
Yeah, and the other question is that if Victor Harbor doesn't have a representative, I mean, there are 4 councils, aren't there, in that on that board, that if Victor Harbor is absent, these things happen. Does it matter? Is it going to stop a quorum taking place?
Through the Mayor, again, I can't predict that. It's just one person out of the mix, that's all, and no representation for Victor Harbor. If everyone else can attend, there'll be a quorum.
So on that one, to me, it's that we should be just letting the position lie vacant.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to say anything? Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I fully agree with my colleagues, most of them that say that this is the right decision to be making at this point in time. Given the fact that it's an 8-week period, we're in caretaker, this is the natural decision to make. Put someone who knows the territory in the role, caretaker, in the role. But my question before was definitely motivated out of just that. It is this chamber's right and responsibility to make this call, as well as have that opportunity. And so therefore, it's important to ask the questions around the fairness and the balance and where the decision is being made and made from. Absolutely, these recommendations can be followed or altered, but it's about that opportunity to influence agenda items and the like that motivated the question. It's the right decision, happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. And on that note, if this agenda item is lost, then you may want to propose somebody else, or you are able to make another recommendation yourself as the council. But I will put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour and those against? That's carried, thank you. And I do note what you were saying, Councillor Glasbrook, in terms of the Victor Harbor representative being a councillor as opposed to a staff member here, and perhaps the staff can carry that on to the next council when it comes time to nominate somebody for that board. I need to speak more into the microphone because the live stream can't hear my dulcet tones. I hope you can now. We now come to the mayoral report, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the report for September. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any questions or any debate around the mayoral report? No. If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. There are no elected member reports for September, so we don't need to go to that recommendation because there are none. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have about 4 of them here. Given the commitments we've made to report to this council on progress with the corporate systems implementation project, I note that we have not had reports to this council for August and September, and so my question is, will there be one in October?
CEO, can you answer that, please?
Yes, thank you for the question through the chair. So as part of the risk management review of service levels report that was presented to council in August, I believe, we looked at ways to operate more efficiently, as those reports are simply provided to receive a note and are not for decision. We explained in that council report that we would be reporting as we do with every other council project, and that's using the usual quarterly reporting mechanisms, and that's via the CEO performance review and then reporting that through to the council, as opposed to having the separate report. And I believe we specified specifically that that would include the corporate systems replacement project reporting.
Thank you. You have another question, Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, if I might have another question on that topic. I mean, the corporate systems implementation project is, we all agree, including the acting CEO, this is an extremely important report, not just because it's a project, not just because it's the largest single one we have at present, but because of its profound future consequences. And the monthly reports that we've had in the past, this is something to me. We've also not been getting reports that were expected to be coming in the Friday member updates. They've been missing also. I think this is the project where
Sorry, Councillor Robertson, these are questions without notice. Your preamble's quite long. Can you just ask the questions that you want?
Yes. Why is it that we are downgrading this project to the extent that we are not getting reports on what's happening with it?
Through the Mayor, to be clear, we're not downgrading the project at all. In fact, we're making sure that our limited resources are being put into delivery and implementation of that extremely important project, as opposed to reporting, which has largely been highly operational reporting on that project. And we are altering so that we're providing strategic level reporting quarterly to the council.
Thank you. Your next question, Councillor Robertson, you said you had 4.
Yep. What is the progress on the recruitment of the human resource manager for the council?
Through the Mayor, I have appointed a recruitment consultant to undertake that recruitment process for us. I've been toing and froing with them over the last few days regarding the final advertisement and details of that. I've had a specific discussion with them about the flavour of that role and where we're trying to head the future of us as a council, and in particular the importance of that role being manager of people and culture, fundamental for our entire organisation. And we've indeed approved the position description as part of that recruitment. It should be released to market any day now. Thank you, and the Mayor's just asked me to add to that to let you know that we have got temporary resources in that role. In fact, a suite of temporary resources to make sure that we're actually able to recruit and backfill some of the other crucial positions for our organisation that have been left vacant for various reasons. So though that hasn't ceased, as in that position continues, we just haven't got that longer term recruitment in place yet.
Yeah, thank you.
And your 4th question.
Yeah.
Your 4th question?
Well, that's 4th out of 5. Will the Main Street Stage 4 project be finished on or before the 16th of December?
Kathy.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Yes, we are very hopeful that it will be, subject to any unforeseen or obviously weather circumstances. The project is tracking very well and on schedule.
Okay, and then my final question is what progress is being made with SA Water on the provision of the increased capacity of the water line to the fire hydrant at the Whale Centre and therefore the opening of that facility?
Through the Mayor, we're waiting for confirmation, but it does look like the new flow tests conducted after the Main Street works are looking positive. The matter will now is being referred back through building rules to the MFS to consider the current flow rate. So we are still aiming for a November completion, and it looks like we may have some positive news on that water flow.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions without notice? No. In that case, we then move to motions on notice. You have a motion on notice, Councillor Kemp, to revoke the strategic review of service levels. The first recommendation is to receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Kemp, and seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. My motion is that the council rescind the following resolution of OC 3592022 made at the August 22nd Ordinary Council meeting. The motion that I want rescinded is the council will acknowledge the need to support more efficient customer service process, including but not limited to council members directing customers via the usual customer service channels in the first instance, directing council members' requests to the administration via the appropriate channels and with the appropriate level of information to enable determination that the information is required for the fulfilment of the council members' duties. That's the motions. I'd like the resolution to be rescinded.
Councillor Kemp, I received a email from our governance officer, and she says Councillor Kemp uses the word rescind in his motion or notice of motion, and technically it should be revoke. And to be precise, council should use the term revoke rather than rescind, as referenced in the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures in the Local Government Act. Revoke is to cancel or invalidate by withdrawing or reversing, whereas rescind is to repel, annul or declare void. So are you happy to change that word rescind to revoke?
Yes, I'm quite happy to use that word revoke.
So I'll just, if you can do that. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Personally myself, I believe that these resolution limits the ability of elected members to do their function, their role. And I believe that is under the section 59 of the roles of members of council to serve the overall public interest of the community as a person elected to the council to represent the interests of residents and ratepayers of the council, to provide community leadership and guidance and to facilitate communication between the community and the council. And under section 61, elected members access to information by members of council. A member of council is entitled to, at any reasonable time in connection with the performance or discharge of the function or duties of the member, whether under this act or another, without charge, to have access to any relevant council documents, including but not limited to. Now I see what happened since this resolution was passed, that I put in requests for some information on behalf of the community, and I was responded back by saying, please put it through according to the resolutions. To me, that's saying to me that I'm not doing my job. I can't do my job, putting it back through there, because people have come to me as an elected member to work on their behalf because they had some issues. Now, part of the reason why they came to me is because I've asked them to, have you gone through to the process of going to the customer services? And they said, no, they don't want it because they've done it before and they don't want to go do that again because they get no results back. And this is history. And again, that's a common problem within all councils about how a community gets feedback. So the point I get from here is that I have stated to the community members, as I said before, addressing the inquiry to the CEO and the SMTs is a sign of respect for those positions, and I believe that this is a protocol of the existing CEO that the members of the CMT can pick the inquiry up to instigate a response. Most of my requests through emails to the CEO or the acting CEO at the moment, and to the CMT elected members, is more of a higher level, just a general inquiry from the community saying, when can I get my bin collected? Or got a broken bin in that context, in that way. So these are higher level stuff, more about planning issues, development applications, and some of the stuff can be quite sensitive, confidential, which we don't want to put through the main channels. So to myself, I can see that I can and have been doing my role, and I see these resolutions is limiting my ability to do so. One of the things that we talk about is the council members also have council members access to information policy. which they are bound by when making requests of the administration. The states in there, a particular reference is that the policy requires the council members to put requests through the Chief Executive Officer or other senior managers. Council members are not to seek information of other staff members as they may be interpreted as a direction rather than a request. All my requests through has always been, I believe, of a high level, and I believe that that's the way it should happen. It should go through the CEO. My understanding, and I had said to me from a senior management team member going back about 2 years ago, that by having that coming through, if that director sees that email come in as part of their portfolio, they pick it up without the CEO at the time to direct them. So that actually cuts down some time frames there. So again, as I said before, this is, to me, is limiting my ability to represent the community and work on behalf of the community if I have to go through this. When you look at the resolutions in the section is, but not limited to, that's an open slather to what can be done. To me, I see this process as limiting elected members to doing their job. And when you look at the council members directing customers via the usual customer service channels in the first instance, they always try to do that. If they choose not to, it's their prerogative to say, no, I do want to do that. I want you as my elected member to work on my behalf. That's what our role is. And the second one, directing council requests to the administration, that's what we do anyway. We put everything through the CEO and it's just stating why we want that information. So I don't understand these two dot points. One is that, you know, I think we all do it. Number two is that we do anyway, so I don't see they're not valid to me. And again, to me, there seems to be a bit of a push to try and control what elected members can and can't do in the way of working for the community and seeking information on behalf of the community. So that's why I want these resolutions revoked. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Kemp has covered the issues well. I'm one of those councillors that can be pictured as being, you know, the ones where we've, you know, where it says here on page 169 that the administration is further impacted by a preference of some council members to seek a higher level of service by the senior management team. Well, hello, this was what we were told at the very beginning of this council, that you had 4 people that you could go to, and that was the CEO and the 3 directors. That's the way that I've always worked, and I've put quite a number of these requests forward, and the provisions on the top of page 170 were not intended to be utilised by council members to routinely provide tailored levels of services to their customers and bypass council's efficient regular customer service. I'm staggered that this clause has been put in here. I find it, you know, really, really unhelpful, because, you know, from my perspective, I don't come along to the council unless someone has tried already to get a level of service out of the administration and has been knocked back. I try to make sure that, and I think that probably most of the deputations and petitions that have been presented in this period of the council are probably ones that have been initiated essentially by myself, with putting to groups of people in particular to say these are powerful tools to get the attention and service that you want. You should go ahead and do them, use them, and people have done that. So where one gets a request for information that or support, then that's what we're supposed to provide. And then the most efficient customer service process is the one that goes through existing customer service procedures, is something that, well, it's one thing that I hope happens out of our corporate system implementation program, is that we'll have more staff that'll be problem solvers. We'll have more open, engaged arrangements for ratepayers to question data and things that that they want to know about, and that they'll have an opportunity to dive into, you know, the databases, not everything, of course, but covering 90% of the questions that they have, that they'll be able to get it directly off the website. And I think we presently employ 7 or 8 customer service staff that we might be able to have fewer staff, because we have a better system of providing interaction between the ratepayers and our council staff. And so to me, I voted against every one of the proposals for the August meeting. This was one of them, that because I believe it's a poor process, poor precedent to be setting at this point in time. We don't know at present to what extent the staff here are suffering from absenteeism or resignations or any other constraint to what they need to achieve. So we don't know how things are going, whether this is necessary to have these restrictions in place for any longer. But to me, I find them
We have 1 minute left, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I find them to be ones that I would hope that we don't see this back again in the new council.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Just in relation to one of your queries, you said that you hope that more customers would be have their questions answered when the system came in. I thought you might be interested in the customer service satisfaction report for August, where 96% of customer interactions at the front counter were resolved by customer liaison staff, and 65% of customer interactions via the phone were resolved by customer liaison staff, which is above our average. And we had 3,523 total customer interactions in August, which is 3 times the amount of it usually is. So I think the customer service staff are doing pretty well. You can have a look at that later on if you're interested. Does
yes,
anybody
Mayor,
want to...
if I might just add to that.
Put the motion.
That
Formal motion to put the motion.
Sorry, the motion's been called to be put. You second that, Councillor Schofield. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost, Councillor Littley. Councillor Robertson, you've spoken for your 5 minutes. Do the rest of are you happy for Councillor Robertson to continue speaking? Or those that are happy for him to continue speaking? Put your hand up. Those who were not happy with him continuing to speak? Sorry, Councillor Robertson, you've had your speech. Does anybody else want to speak to this motion? Councillor Glasbrook.
I just asked a question more than anything. Is there a process or a procedure in relation to council's pathway if they feel that the first approach has failed?
Through the Mayor, yes. You're most welcome to come to the senior management team if indeed there has been a failed customer interaction, and we're absolutely happy to help support there. The idea to try and run the most efficient council that we can is to direct our customers' request that they first go through the processes that have been established there to support them and provide them with that efficient service. If there's a reason that it's not satisfactory, then absolutely elected members can play an advocacy role there. It's just simply not tenable for that to be each time a customer asks you a question.
Are there any further questions or any further debate? Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins, and fantastic report you gave there from the acting CEO about the service provided by the customer services. They do work very hard and they do provide a great service, but this is what it's not about, this motion. It's not about those stats. I'll continue to work for my elected members. So I will continue to work for my community who elected me to be here for that reason. And I'll work with administration as best I can to help resolve the issues that they're facing as well, to make their lives a bit more simpler and easier as well. But I have to do my job, what I believe is correct, in what I believe is right, how I perform. So that's why I looked at these resolutions, and I just felt that it just wasn't doing what I believe is right for myself, maybe for other elected members, but everyone has to make their own minds up as to how they see these resolutions, how they affect their abilities to do their job. But from my perspective, it's my belief, that's how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you. I now put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost. Could you leave division, please? All those in favour? Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. And against, Councillor Mann, Councillor Littley, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Hales and Councillor Schofield. One of the reasons I asked for a division is because when I asked all those in favour and those against, I actually couldn't count the arms because they were going up and down so quickly and some people didn't vote, I didn't think. So for me to be clear about what the vote was, I asked for a division. Can you please, when you're voting, make sure that you're very clear in what you're voting for? It makes it a lot easier for me. We go to 19.2, which is a motion on notice. We've done that one. So we move to 19.3. This is a motion on notice from Councillor Robertson, reducing operational risk in the 2022-23 business plan. The first recommendation is receiving and noting the motion. I'd also like to add that this is quite a significant decision, and you need to have a think about whether or not you are following your policy in relation to caretaker mode when you're considering this motion, as the policy suggests that significant decisions should not be made in caretaker mode, but it is up to the council as to whether or not you follow your policy or not. Do I have someone to move the first recommendation? Councillor Robertson? And someone to second that recommendation? Councillor Glasbrook? Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting? Do you want to speak to receiving and noting the motion on notice, Councillor Robertson?
No.
No. In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Robertson, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would. This to me is the crux of the issue of trying to help out with the huge problem that we had a couple of months back. I'm pleased to hear tonight it's somewhat ameliorated by getting some assistance in. But the still remains, I believe, the root of in our business plan for this year, that the expenditure of that we'll be fortunate, but of course if we do achieve it, well and good. The completion of our business plan for this year, and that was to bring back the budget, which...
Councillor Robertson, do you want to move your motion, and then I'll ask you to speak to it after you've moved it. So move it first. Thank you.
Yep. I will move that motion. Yep.
Do you want to read it out?
Yep. That the council approve a reduction in the activities and expenditure in the 22-23 business plan and budget of $1.5 million of capital expenditure and $0.7 million of operating budget to substantially mitigate operational risk, eliminate works in progress carry over into the next financial year 23-24, and give a boost to the corporate systems implementation project. Project activity and budget reduction to be focused on business units facing the most severe staffing constraints.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes. To me, this is the hub of the nub, I should say, of what we should have been doing to take the workload off our staff to be able to make sure that we finish the business plan for the year on time, not get involved in having vast numbers of WIP projects, and that we particularly take the heat off the staff in terms of the workload that was going on in relation to the external pressures that we had on the budget with regards to rising costs of materials and labour and the availability of labour, with regard to resignations, with regard to sickness in the staff cadre, and also to a golden opportunity, especially at this time of the year, to be giving a boost to the corporate systems implementation project, which is our single most important project, I believe, at this time. So this was to bring the budget back basically to what we took out to a community consultation, except that we adjusted back after including the WIP projects. We're now at 16.5 and we went out with 15, and it was $1.5 million increase, and that if we reduce the present operating budget of $1.2 million deficit, brought that back to 0.6. We're coming back to what we went out to community consultation with. So that was essentially, I think, an elected member's attempt to seriously take the heat off the staff in terms of actually implementation of the business plan.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Kemp, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'll move an adjournment motion. I move this item to January 2023 Ordinary Council meeting for the new council to consider this item.
I'm not sure that you can move an adjournment motion for the motion. You either have to have a mover and a seconder.
Technically. You'll get me in there.
And if you second it, then you can't adjourn it.
Could you just check?
Sure. So my understanding, Councillor Kemp, of looking at this is that if we look at motions, a member who has spoken to a motion is permitted to move or second an amendment to the motion, but a motion needs to have a mover and a seconder for it to be a motion. So you can second a motion, and then you can move an adjournment to that motion.
That's what I did. I seconded it. And then I moved an adjournment motion, a formal motion, straight away.
Okay, so you've seconded that and moved a formal motion to adjourn the motion. Do I have a seconder for that adjournment? Thank you, councillor Hales. All those in favour of adjourning it? That's carried, thank you. So that is finished with 19.3 has been adjourned. And motions without notice. Does anybody have any motions without notice? There are no confidential items, so at 7:45, the meeting is finished. Thank you very much, everyone.